Should former Palestinian student Mahmoud Khalil be deported?
You cannot deport an immigrant simply because you dislike his speech.
These are not spontaneous, student-led, peaceful protests.
A massive federal lawsuit named the group that Khalil was a spokesperson for as straight-up collaborators with Hamas.
This person is a threat to national security.
Mahmoud Khalil has not been charged with any crime whatsoever.
Don't let people divert you, Dr. Phil, from the facts of this case.
Tonight, the stakes could not be higher as we continue our debate. Free speech or a national security threat? Should former Palestinian student at Columbia University, Mahmoud Khalil, be deported? Here's what happened yesterday. A Palestinian student and activist at Columbia University has been detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
Turn around.
Okay, let's not.
Is he a threat to national security? Or is this a gross violation of his First Amendment rights? Ileana, a Jewish student leader at Columbia who says she witnessed Khalil at protests. You think they're being disingenuous, that it's not at all about what they say it's about.
They say they're Columbia University apartheid divest, which means just taking Columbia endowment money out of investments in Israel, but that's actually not what they are at all. They wrote a statement that said explicitly they're fighting for the eradication of Western civilization. Or one of their other spokesmen said that he wanted to kill Zionists and Jewish students.
Nardine Kaswani, the outspoken leader of Within Our Lifetime, a pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist organization, has led high-profile protests across New York calling for the end of Israel while facing accusations of inciting violence and fueling unrest with her provocative tactics.
Palestinians are labeled terrorists for resisting occupation while Zionists burn villages, kill tens of thousands of children, and get U.S. funding to do so. So when I call for an end to the establishment of the State of Israel, this is an anti-colonial position rather than a call for harm.
Do you believe that October 7th was resistance, or do you believe it was an attack?
You've used your platform to spread debunked claims like beheaded Israeli babies, infants burned alive in their cribs. These falsehoods remain on your website, even after being disproved. But when there's actual
Nardine, it hasn't been disproved. I have seen the footage myself. I have been in the kibbutz. You will not condemn October 7th. You will not say October 7th was an atrocity. We continue our conversation from last night with voices from both sides of the debate. We begin with Columbia student Eliana, who wants to respond to Within Our Lifetime founder Nardine Kaswani. Eliana, thank you for what you had to say last night and for listening to my conversation with Nardine about her position or lack of positions. I'm not sure which to say. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond what you heard.
To be honest, she spent so much time peddling lies, I'm not even sure where to begin. I can just say that the way Nardine spoke about her position, I think the way she constantly answered every question with a question and whataboutism, that itself should kind of speak enough to the veracity of her case that she's making. And it's her organization that she's in charge of Within Our Lifetime that has assaulted my friends and me on school property and outside of school property at Columbia. They have screamed at us to go back to Poland. Nardine herself has said she doesn't think any Zionist should be in New York City, so that means I shouldn't be allowed to exist, or neither should the majority of Jews be allowed to exist either. And yeah, most of what she said were just complete misunderstandings of history or just straight up lies about the conflict. So I could respond to any points, and I'm not even sure the best place to be what that would be.
I confronted her with the facts. She didn't seem to know much about details until it was convenient for her to talk about details. She says Israel is an apartheid state until I give her a list of 10 facts that prove it's anything but an apartheid state. And I just don't think anybody's really confronted her with facts before and made her listen to it. And I don't think she liked that very much at all. But it is what it is. You can't change the facts, and at least she's heard them once. So, I mean, she didn't get a chance to talk over what I had to say. So doesn't mean she listened, doesn't mean it changed anything, but at least it's been said. And she can't say she didn't have an opportunity to say what she had to say. There's just absolutely no basis in fact for her positions. And she refuses to condemn October 7th, and she refuses to condemn Hamas. And so we have that on record, and she has to live with that. I want to add Attorney Brooke Goldstein, founder of the Lawfare Project, who is an advocate for Jewish civil rights. Brooke, thank you for joining us. I'll first give you a chance to respond to what transpired last night.
Well, thank you, Dr. Phil, for having me on. I'm very grateful to be here. You know, frankly, it's been very painful and quite triggering to listen to someone like Nirdine Kiswani, who is an avowed pro-Hamas terror supporter. She is a October 7th denier. She espouses a type of hatred that has led to violence across this country. And then she uses the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict as some sort of affirmative defense for her pro-terror, pro-Hamas support. I actually found it a little bit laughable. She calls Hamas a political party. Hamas is a foreign designated terrorist group that's responsible for the slaughter of innocent civilians. She calls for some sort of democratic state to replace Israel, while, number one, there's never been a democratic state in the entire Arab world. These are Islamist countries who impose Sharia law and who discriminate against non-Muslim civilians. And then at the same breath, she calls for the elimination of the Jewish state, which is a genocidal claim, and complains that the Palestinians are subjected to genocide, which you so accurately refuted. She claims that Israel denies medical care to Palestinian Arabs when Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October the 7th, the only reason why he was alive to carry out the October 7th attack is because he received life saving medical attention in an Israeli prison. Right now, by the way, breaking news, there are hundreds of Gazans who are protesting Hamas on the streets of Gaza, saying, Hamas, get out. You do not represent us. And it's unfortunate that Hamas has people who are allegedly acting as spokespeople for the same terrorist group that is using the Palestinian Muslims in Gaza as human shields and victimizing them. There are reports, for example, of Hamas gathering children, men, women, and children in hospitals and in buildings, using them as human shields. And on one occasion, it was filmed that the child was running away and Hamas shot the child dead. She's an October 7th denier, as I mentioned, but she's also been very open about her terrorism and her support of terrorism. She has said that the Arabs are allowed to engage, and I think she repeated it on your show right now, in any type of activity to resist occupation by all means necessary, means that she endorses the mass rape, the murder, the burning of women and children alive, the taking of hostages, as long as there is an Israeli-Palestinian conflict to serve as her affirmative defense. She's worn a button that prominently displays the image of Abu Obaida, who is a spokesperson for Hamas's military wing. She has led protests outside of children's hospitals in the United States to disrupt those hospitals. She was arrested at a pro-Hamas protest in New York City. She's featured in a webinar where she says we have to defeat the illegitimate Zionist settler state that has no right to exist. Abolishing Israel is the key to peace. At her rallies, many people have been beaten up. This is a pro-terror spokesperson, and she's unfortunately used the opportunity to come on your show to use all the buzzwords and all the talking points to justify her support of terrorism. The equivalent, basically, Dr. Phil, would be about a year and a half after 9/11, inviting Al-Qaeda on your show to spew all their talking points to justify flying two planes into the Twin Towers. And that's what's going on. And for some reason, you know, when it has to do with Jews, when it has to do with Israel, Palestine, we have to hear both sides. It's a debate. There is no debate here, right? There is good and there is evil. Side that is for human life, and there is a side for death and destruction. And that is what she stands for. And when she says globalize the intifada, she wants to bring, and they have succeeded in bringing, that destruction, that hate, that radical Islamism to our shores here in the United States. And I've always said that this poses an extreme national security threat. And we need to wake up. We need to stop giving these people a platform to spew their hatred. And we have to unequivocally come out on the side of being for life and for peace. And that is not what she stands for.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, but I think people getting to hear from someone like that puts a face on that evil. And I think it's a wake-up call so people don't just kind of think of it as a political position, because I think it's much more dangerous than that. We have to take a quick break. Another attorney who says student protests are being framed as a national security threat when they're really just organic. Are they? We'll talk about that next. Life is full of surprises, and emergencies often strike when we least expect them. But preparation is key, and that's where Jace Case comes in. With Jace Case, you'll have essential emergency prescription medications right at your fingertips, ready when you need them most. Whether it's an unexpected illness or a travel mishap, having the right meds on hand can turn a potential crisis into just a minor inconvenience. Don't let the unexpected catch you off guard. Jace Case gives you peace of mind so you can tackle life surprises with confidence. Be ready. Take charge today. Head over to jace.com. That's JASE.com. And when you check out, use the code PHIL, spelled PHIL, to get a discount on your order and to have the right meds on hand the moment you need them. The IRS is the largest collection agency, with April 15th fast approaching. It's more aggressive than ever. If you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, waiting's not an option. The smart move is to get ahead of this. Listen, never contact the IRS alone. Let the experts at Tax Network USA handle it for you. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS. Now, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, Tax Network USA's attorneys and negotiators have already resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's free. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil. That's tnusa.com/Dr. Phil. April 15th is just around the corner. Act now.
Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Secretary of State has the right to revoke a green card or a visa for individuals who serve or are adversarial to the foreign policy and national security interests of the United States of America. And Mahmoud Khalil was an individual who was given the privilege of coming to this country to study at one of our nation's finest universities and colleges. And he took advantage of that opportunity, of that privilege, by siding with terrorists. We have a zero-tolerance policy for siding with terrorists, period.
America's largest Muslim civil rights group, the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as CAIR, is condemning Colombia for caving to what they call the Trump administration's Israel First agenda. Edward Ahmad Mitchell is the National Deputy Director of CAIR, who says they are also leading the fight to free detained activist Mahmoud Khalil. You say that these protests, these demonstrations, are just organic protest coming out of consciousness by students. Fair statement?
First thing I want to note is that we are not representing Mahmoud Khalil in his immigration case. We represent him in a separate case involving Columbia University, which I'm happy to discuss as we get further into the program. In terms of the protests themselves, absolutely. As we all know, the October 7th attack happened back in 2023. And in response, the Israeli government said they were going to punish everyone in Gaza. They were going to cut off all food, fuel, water, electricity, because they were fighting, quote, human animals. That's what the Israeli defense minister said. And then they carried out that threat. And young people in America, because of social media, we're able to every day see footage of young Palestinian kids and mothers being blown to pieces. And those protests were organic. They were led by the students. And these students decided to engage in peaceful protests and peaceful acts of civil disobedience, modeled after the protests that students did against the Vietnam War, against apartheid South Africa, against segregation. And that spread across the entire country. And Dr. Phil, these protests were very diverse. Most of them were led by a combination of Jewish, Palestinian, and Black students and others. At Columbia, for example, they had Passover events every Friday night at the Columbia encampment. So these were diverse protests, and the demand was very simple. Stop the genocide in Gaza, stop the war crimes against Palestinians, and disentangle any university financing from the Israeli government. Now, Dr. Phil, were there some protesters who said crazy things? Yes. Were there some incidents of vandalism? Yes. No question about that. But ACLED, which is an organization that studies conflict and monitors around the world, said 97% of the protests that occurred were peaceful. And that's a really important fact. We always hone in on the vandalism that occurs and the behavior that's bad that occurs. The overwhelming majority of these protests were peaceful and were diverse and were focused on stopping the genocide in Gaza.
Well, you say the genocide in Gaza, and I really have to challenge the presumption in the predicate of your statement. To say that there's genocide going on in Gaza is something that you say as though it's a fact, and I know that there's been a big PR war on both sides of this, but I have to take exception to that statement. I don't think I've ever seen any combatants in a conflict that went to more effort to not have civilian casualties than I've seen Israel go to in this conflict. I don't think I've ever seen somebody drop tens of thousands of leaflets over what's going to be a targeted area. I don't think I've ever seen them providing food and water and supplies to an enemy that they're having to deal with. And I don't know what they could do when Hamas does what they did, which was an absolute attack on primarily civilians, and then go back and hide among the people, the civilians, where they have weapons stores under hospitals and schools and things like that. I don't know what Israel is supposed to do when that takes place. And when we look at the demonstrations about that, I think some of them have been peaceful. I think some of them have been organized by outside agitators. We've studied and followed the money, and I think a lot of them have been brought about by outside influences. So I suppose it's somewhere in between. They're not just all organic. That's just simply not the truth. If you're a business owner, listen up now. You will not want to miss this. Outdated systems are costing you time, money, and opportunity. Thousands of companies have modernized with FYSI's AI integration and solutions. FYSI implements smart, automation, and predictive insights that sharpen your competitive edge. This is what separates billion-dollar companies from small businesses, and FYSI can help you make that leap. Don't wait. Get your free $5,000 risk assessment now with promo code Dr. Phil. That is promo code DRPHIL at fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 today. That's code Dr. Phil. Visit fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 for your free $5,000 risk assessment. Let's cut to the chase. Your savings could be in serious trouble. When Elon Musk is out here warning us to brace for temporary hardship, you might want to listen. I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. Are you going to sit back and hope for the best or take control of your financial future? Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505. That's DRPHIL to 50505 today. We've studied and followed the money, and I think a lot of them have been brought about by outside influences. So I suppose it's somewhere in between. They're not just all organic. That's just simply not the truth.
So, Dr. Phil, look, I'm a lawyer. I'm a former criminal prosecutor. I deal in facts, not suppositions. So just a few facts to address. Number one, the protests were organic. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that these protests were funded by nefarious actors or foreign organizations that some have alleged. And if any of them were funded, then people should put up or shut up. Show the evidence. Where'd the money come from? Who gave the money? No one has done that. It's just supposition. And this happens, Dr. Phil, every time there's a protest movement, right? Whenever kids protested Vietnam, they were called pro-communist, anti-American. When Black people violated the law by protesting segregation, you're being influenced by communists. You hate America. You want to destroy the American way of life. And same thing when protests against South African apartheid occurred. Dr. Phil, what we've got to do is address the substance of the issues, right? Address what the protesters are actually saying, not assume the worst about their intentions or assume they must be nefarious actors. Again, we have to deal in facts. Second thing I'll say briefly, Dr. Phil, in terms of genocide is a huge word. It's a huge allegation. I don't make it lightly. I'll give you just a few facts to support my contention that a genocide is occurring in Gaza. First and foremost, the International Court of Justice, which is the premier institution that addresses human rights violations around the world, has said that the allegations leveled against the Israeli government do meet the definition of genocide. Now, that case is still unfolding and going on, but they have acknowledged that. Numerous human rights groups have said that what's happening at the very least is ethnic cleansing. That includes Israeli human rights groups, not just Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, but Israeli human rights groups. But beyond that, Dr. Phil, I just want you to consider what Israeli leaders have themselves said. After October 7th, the Israeli defense minister said on TV, we are cutting off all food, all fuel, all water, all electricity to everyone in Gaza because we are fighting, and he said, quote, human animals. That was a description of the Palestinian people. And he went on to do that. They blockaded everything. Nothing got into the Palestinian people. And on top of that, the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, told Israeli soldiers, as you're going into Gaza, think about what Amalek did to you. Now, Dr. Phil, you're a Christian, I'm a Muslim, but we're both familiar with the Bible. There's a story in the Bible about the kingdom of Amalek attacking the Israelis, the children of Israel, and God then telling the Israelis, supposedly, to go into Amalek and kill every man, woman, child, infant, and ox in response. And the Prime Minister of Israel quoted this story to Israeli soldiers. And then those soldiers went and carried out what he said, Dr. Phil. You can look at the footage. The Israeli government has not been shooting at Hamas fighters and accidentally killing civilians. They have blown up empty mosques. They have blown up hospitals. They've blown up refugee camps with nothing but civilians there.
I'm going to respond to what you call facts. Ileana, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to respond to the so-called facts, but I'll talk about the Jewish tokenization first. He just mentioned about the Jewish presence in these protests. That is Jewish in name only, right? He said that they had Passover events every Friday night. Passover is a 8-day holiday that is actually about Jews escaping their oppression to return to the land of Israel. If anything, it's a national liberation story for the Jewish people, which is something I would think that most liberal Americans would be able to get behind. And essentially, the Jews were used to tokenize the encampment and say that it wasn't actually anti-Semitic. But the reality is that these people were chanting, we don't want two states, we want all of it, right? If we want to talk about facts, the facts are that there were Jews who were chanting globalize the Intifada, and there were Jews, and a small percentage of them, but they were chanting death to the Zionist state, which is in no way peaceful protest. And these are things that the entire protests were chanting together. If you look at what Jewish students at Columbia have actually written, last May, we wrote an open letter called In Our Name, which over 800 active Jewish students signed, which talked about our Zionist commitments. And just because we're not all speaking up loudly and publicly condemning the encampment and the violent and the violent protests happening on campus, that's just because we want to go to class. It's not because we're not here. The reality is most Jews on campus absolutely detest the protests and what the protests have been saying, and we just want to go to class.
Thank you for that. I'm glad to hear you speak up about that because you're there. You're living it and dealing with it every day and trying to get to class. And these are not just peaceful protests, but there is intimidation taking place, and there has been violence within a lot of these. I've been on campuses and I've talked to some of these demonstrators, and they're very clear about what their goal and intent is, and it's anything but peaceful. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't others there that are peaceful protesters. I 100% agree with that. I'm not trying to color the whole group with those that I've talked to. We have to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and respond to some of the comments that Edward had to make. We'll be right back. Edward, you made a very eloquent speech about whether or not this was genocidal and cited some authority that it's been labeled as genocidal. And you're quite right. There has been control of some of what has gone into Gaza or not in terms of food and water. There have been things said about going after an enemy and that is hiding among the populace. And you are right, they have controlled the sea because they've been trying to bring weapons in by sea. There has been control of some of the supplies that have gone in there because they've been stolen by Hamas and not gotten to the Palestinian people. There have been bombs that have killed many Palestinians, including Palestinian women and children, and that happens in war. It particularly happens when the invaders go back and hide among the civilian populace. And if you deal with facts, you can't deny that that's taking place. You know, sometimes a non-credible denial is worse than an admission. Do you deny that that takes place?
A few things I would say, Dr. Phil. Number one, Gaza absolutely is densely packed. There absolutely are Hamas militants and other Palestinian militants who are all over Gaza. But the facts are this, that most of those individuals are hiding in tunnels under the ground, safe from Israeli bombing above ground. Number two, the Israeli government is, again, deliberately, intentionally targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. They're not accidentally killing civilians while trying to kill Hamas militants. And the proof of that is their attacks on hospitals, on refugee camps, on mosques, on even churches in the middle of service where there was no fighting happening at the time. And again, the Israeli military has openly admitted what they're doing. Early on in the conflict, Dr. Phil, an Israeli military spokesman said, we're no longer going to fire warning shots at apartment buildings before we blow them up. As you may know, in years past, the Israelis would fire sometimes a warning shot at the roof of a building to give civilians and others time to get out of the building. They said, we're not going to do that anymore. They didn't give us warning on October 7th. We're not going to give them any warning before we blow up their building. So the Israeli government has openly admitted they are deliberately killing civilians by cutting off all food and water, including the stuff that was going through inspection. It's not like there was any risk there were weapons in these food deliveries. They were just deliberately cutting off food to squeeze the population. And by the way, they were blockading and limiting food well before October 7th. Palestinian kids would die of disease and starvation well before October 7th because of the blockade. So, Dr. Phil, what you're saying isn't completely false. There is some truth in what you're saying, but I tell you, there's also truth in what I'm saying. And if we can just have a bit of an open mind here, I think you're going to have to acknowledge the Israeli government, yes, was attacked. Israel was attacked on October 7th. There were attacks on civilians. No question about that. But it is also true the Israeli government is attacking civilians in Gaza en masse in a genocidal way. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, I think you're way overstating what you're saying. Coming up, a new lawsuit connects anti-Israeli campus movements to providing material support to Hamas. What you need to know. Mark Goldfeder is the director of the National Jewish Advocacy Center. He just filed a massive federal lawsuit that named the group that Khalil was a spokesperson for, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, along with other organizations, as straight-up collaborators with Hamas. Not protesters, not activists, but operatives. And Mark joins us now. Tell me about this lawsuit and what made you decide now was the time to do this, and what is the objective?
I'm more than happy to do that, but just as a fellow attorney and someone who wants to talk about facts, I'm going to have to respond to a few of those false allegations that were made. I'm going to give you the actual facts, and I'm also going to give you the citations. First of all, in his statement about Amalek, it was a wonderful speech, but Netanyahu actually said, and I quote, "I'm referring to Hamas, not the Palestinian people." You know, your previous guest said that the ICJ had said it was a plausible genocide. On the show Hard Talk, the former president of the ICJ, Joan Donahue, said she needed to address this lie publicly. And so this is a direct quote from the show. You can watch it yourself. She said, ICJ did not decide, and this is something where I'm correcting what's often said in the media, it did not decide that the claim of genocide was plausible. Now, per the ICJ's own jurisprudence, for genocidal intent, for a pattern of conduct to be accepted as evidence of genocide, it would have to be such that it could be the only possible inference. Two cases that decided that: Bosnia versus Serbia in 2007, Croatia versus Serbia in 2015. To even claim that the only inference, the only possible inference here is genocide, you'd have to do exactly what the other side is doing, which is ignore the fact that a terror group, Hamas, is literally holding hostages and committing war crimes daily, despite Israel's repeated assertions that if they would only surrender, the war would stop. And finally, again, our previous guest talked a lot about blockades and sieges. Blockades are a lawful military tactic in the course of war. They are regulated by international humanitarian law, not prohibited by it. Just read Article 23 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. It's very explicit that a high contracting party, such as Israel, shall allow the free passage of humanitarian supplies, but that is if and only if there are no serious reasons to believe these supplies are being diverted from their destination or used for military purposes, and that's exactly what is happening here. Now, as it relates to our lawsuit, and as that relates to Mr. Khalil's deportation, their move from the country here is not only legally justified. To not do so would be to ignore numerous laws. This case should not set the bar for future deportations because the list of his actions, not speech, any number of which would independently justify the deportation of a non-citizen under well-established immigration law, is so extensive that the only risk here is creating an artificially high standard for future deportations. He leads the Columbia University Apartheid Divest, CUAD, which is the primary pro-Hamas group fronting for the now suspended Students for Justice in Palestine. There is a world of distance and a legal chasm between being pro-Palestinian and being pro-Hamas. And there's a difference between being pro-Hamas and providing material support to a foreign terrorist organization. SJP and its affiliates like CUAD have already been credibly accused in federal court of providing material support to Hamas. And I'm talking about Khalil and his group, but the same is true for the other defendants, which include another one of your previous guests, Nardine Kiswani, and Within Our Lifetime. Within Our Lifetime was originally SJP New York. They changed their name. They're essentially the grown-up version of SJP. I'll give you some examples. On October 7th, for example, amid the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history, then Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh called for the resistance abroad to join this battle any way they can and to be partners in creating this great victory. And these groups responded to Hamas's call for mass mobilization. They disseminated a manifesto and a plan of attack created by their parent organizations. In this toolkit, they identified themselves as part of a unity intifada governed by Hamas's, quote, unified command of terrorist operations in Gaza. And they said they're doing this to achieve liberation and that all resistance is legitimate, all of it is necessary, including armed struggle. And under Khalil's leadership, CUAD has become one of the most effective propaganda arms for Palestinian terrorism. They even received explicit thanks from a virtual guest speaker from PFLP, a Hamas-allied Palestinian terrorist organization, on behalf of their friends and brothers in Hamas during a Resistance 101 event that was hosted at Columbia by CUAD and Within Our Lifetime. You know, at the Columbia encampment that Khalil organized and spoke for, his followers famously shouted, "We are all Hamas," and identified the Jews on Columbia's campus as Al-Qassam, that's Hamas's military wing's next target. The assistance that Khalil and his allies have provided to Hamas through their propaganda work is material, it is critical, it is systematic, and it's of significant monetary value. But beyond propaganda, CUAD also engaged in threatening illegal conduct, not speech. in furtherance of this resistance. Don't let people divert you, Dr. Phil, from the facts of this case and these idealized versions of speech. Through his leadership in CUAD, he coordinated hostile takeovers that obstructed campus operations and foreseeably resulted in all kinds of illegal activity, including, but not limited to, trespass, assault, vandalism, robbery, destruction of property, arson, criminal possession of weapons, burglary, false imprisonment, and intimidation. Dozens of his followers were arrested for committing crimes. In October, his group doubled down on the notion that Jews should be murdered, even if they used the code word Zionist. And again, responding to them, Nardine Kiswani said yesterday, sorry, anti-Semites don't get to define anti-Semitism, and she doesn't get to define the word Zionism. For the vast majority of Jewish people across time and space, Zionism is and always has been an important part of their Jewish identity. And just responding to her ignorance, I think she should take a look in the Quran itself, which is quite clear about the long history of Jews in Israel and in Jerusalem. Just a couple of weeks ago, Khalil led CUAD to take over a Milstein library at Barnard College, again, chanting slogans, praising Hamas, mocking the administration that was trying to clear them from the area, blocking students en route to study. They were handing out propaganda booklets literally created by the Hamas media office. There's no subtlety here. CUAD and its leaders are part of the public relations arm of Hamas, and they're aiding and abetting terror.
Well, we have some of those pamphlets that were distributed at a protest outside Barnard Library where Mahmoud Khalil allegedly helped lead the demonstration against the recent expulsion of Barnard student activists. The materials were labeled as coming from the Hamas media office. That's just how they were labeled. This event was held 3 days before his detainment. And Mahmoud Khalil denies knowing anything about these pamphlets being passed out at the protest. Nonetheless, this is what was being distributed outside the library. We have to take a quick break. Coming up, why Brooks says Khalil is trying to justify his actions by misinterpreting the First Amendment. We'll talk about that when we come back.
You're going to be under arrest. So turn around.
Okay, let's not. Okay, he's not resisting. He's giving me his phone, okay? He's not, I understand. He's not resisting.
Put your arm around. There's no use for this. Don't worry about it. You're going to have to come with us. Don't worry. I'm coming with you. Don't worry. No one's resisting. No one's getting worked up.
You guys really don't need to be doing all of that.
It's fine.
حبيبي كيف بدي اتصل فيك؟
Take Amy. Call Amy.
Okay. Hi Amy. Yeah, they just like handcuffed him and took him. I don't know what to do.
Ben Shapiro is a good friend of mine, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think he said it pretty well. He said if Hamas laid down their weapons, we might have a two-state arrangement. If Israel laid down their weapons, we would have a second Holocaust. He felt very strongly about that. And tonight we're tackling the question that the whole country is eager to have answered. And that's where the line will be drawn about what's going to happen on our college campuses. How much is free speech? How much is people protesting based on their conscience? And how much is material support of terrorist groups that wish the United States harm? Brooke, what did you want to say?
This is not about Israel-Palestine, okay? The Muslims have been attacking Jews way before the establishment of the State of Israel. When the State of Israel was established, after the State of Israel was established, this is about the spread of radical Islam and Islamist ideology, particularly within our borders. The person that you had on before represents CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is a Muslim Brotherhood front organization operating in our country. They are pro-Islamist terror sympathizers in suits. Zahra Balloo, who is the executive director of CAIR San Francisco, has gone on record saying, pay attention to Zionist synagogues, Zionists, aka Jews are your enemies. Mikhwad Awad, the executive director of CAIR National, right after the October the 7th Hamas attack, said, the people of Gaza decided to break the siege, and he was happy to see them do so. days after President Trump was shot in Butler, the same person came out and said, "Are you sure this is not an Israeli plot to ignite another war?" The executive director and CEO of CARE Los Angeles said Israel should be attacked. He supports picking up arms. This is about the spread of radical Islam. And no matter how wonderful their talking points, all of their lies spewed are meant to divert you away from that. And you're supposed to disbelieve what your eyes see. These are not spontaneous, student-led, peaceful protests. You just have to see the footage to see the crimes, the mass trespass, the assaults, the civil rights violations, the chance of death to the Jews and death to America. That is what's happening within our country right now. This is not a debate about Israel-Palestine.
Number one, Mahmoud Khalil has not been charged with any crime whatsoever. And he has not been accused of handing out Hamas propaganda. He's not been accused of even expressing support for Hamas. If he provided material support for Hamas, that would be a crime. You wouldn't have to deport him. You could charge him with the crime, put him in jail, and send him away for the rest of his life. And so if they've got the goods on him, prosecute him. But they're not doing that because there's no evidence that he has done that. He has not done that. Point number two. You had a guest earlier who said that the Jewish kids who've been protesting the genocide in Gaza are Jewish in name only. That's incredibly insulting. That's anti-Semitic to deny someone's Jewish identity because you disagree with their view of what's happening in Palestine and Israel. It's just ridiculous. And I just want to condemn that in the strongest terms and express my solidarity with Jewish people all around the world who have the right to determine their own identity. And the last thing I would say is this about Islam. I'm a Muslim, Dr. Phil, so I got to correct the record here. Your last guest said that Muslims have been attacking Jews for millennia. The Quran teaches that Muslims have to respect and protect Christians and Jews. We all believe in the same God, the God of Abraham. And as you may know, Jerusalem was under the control of the Byzantines when the Muslims surrounded Jerusalem. And when the Muslims took over Jerusalem, there were no Jews in the city because the Byzantines had banned Jews. It was the Muslims who insisted Jews must be allowed to come back to Jerusalem and worship. And for centuries, Muslims protected the right of Jewish people to live alongside Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land and across the Muslim world. Some of the greatest Jewish scholars flourished in the Muslim world while Jews were facing persecution in Europe. So I just wanted to note that it's completely incorrect, and anyone can read the Quran to see what it actually says about protecting the rights of religious minorities, especially Jews and Christians. And I want to thank you, Dr. Phil, for listening to opposing viewpoints. And we don't agree, but I think it's big of you to at least listen and let people speak and share their opinions. So thank you for that.
Well, I want people to have an opportunity to make up their own minds about this. Let me ask just straight up, is it a prerequisite, a standard for deportation to be charged with or convicted of a crime? That is not required to meet the standard for deportation, as I understand it. Is that correct?
There are numerous ways you could be deported. Committing a crime is one. Another is lying on your applications. But one thing you cannot do is deport an immigrant simply because you dislike his speech. I don't care whether it's pro-Israel speech, pro-Palestine speech. That alone cannot be the basis to kick someone out of the country who is a lawful permanent resident. And that's what the administration is trying to do. And that's not going to work. You can deport them for committing crimes, for violating other laws and regulations. And again, Mahmoud Khalil has not done that. If they think he has, show the evidence, and that's what a judge will decide.
But Mark, if it's interfering with foreign policy or they are supporting a terror group, then that can certainly meet the standard. Would you agree?
Of course. It is, first of all, it is black letter law that misrepresentations in this context are not protected speech. So this entire First Amendment allegation is a red herring. The government already filed a bunch of things that he lied about. Second, the INA that we talked about applies to green card holders as well. And the Secretary of State has made a clear determination that this person is a threat to foreign policy and national security. And finally, as we allege in our lawsuit, he did provide material support for terror. The DOJ has announced that they are looking into terror charges against affiliated groups. And so I think, if anything, it is a kindness that he has not been charged yet and is only being deported.
Okay. Guys, we are out of time. I really appreciate the civil discourse tonight. Everyone has listened to everyone, which gives my audience, and I promise you this will be in the millions of people that watch this conversation, a chance to do critical thinking and see what's going on here. So thank all of you for intelligent discussion about this, even though you certainly disagree, and I disagree with different points. Special thanks to Brooke, Ileana, Mark, and Edward. I hope we can have this conversation again in the future. All of you at home, thank you. We'll see you next time.